Welcome to the Road is Dead podcast. My name is Robert Curtis. This is episode 85. Five. Is it 85?
85.
I don't know.
I
don't know. I'm a guest.
All right. I'm Rob Curtis. You guys introduce yourselves. I'm going to put the 85 in here.
Tim Strelecki.
Leah Sanda.
And Mike Friedman.
Come, join us on this crazy episode we're about to embark on.
I have no idea where it's going to go.
Right before I hit the record button, I got a text from Dustin Mitchell that said, I'm going to go do a bike fitting today. Do people normally tip for that? Discussion.
Just the tip.
Would you normally tip a bike fitter?
Well, how much is the bike fit?
I don't know. Should I ask him?
I would say generally no. I don't think I've ever tipped or been tipped.
Why do you tip a barista?
For making you a good coffee.
Is a bike fit any different?
Well, okay, why do you tip a barista?
At a guild.
Isn't there?
I'm not anti-tip. I don't want to get
It's because they're paid. Usually, because they're paid less, right? I mean, they don't make much per hour, so they go off the tip. So it's tips plus what you're paid.
We had a coffee shop, and we were hardly ever tipped.
I mean, a plumber doesn't get tipped.
Maybe that's why we don't have a coffee shop anymore.
I mean, if you don't,
it's a viable question. It's a viable
tips
question.
for a service, right? Tips for a service. If you're happy with the service and you say that bike fitter took the extra time to really hone in your problem versus just doing a cleat adjustment and saying you're fine. I mean, I think it's worthy of the service. It's a self-decided thing. Like, why do you feel the need to tip for a coffee every time? I mean, it's like
he says it's $180 traditional fit, not retool.
It's a baseline fit. I just leave it as is, $180.
So no tip? You've never tipped, you say?
I never have, and I've performed probably well over 100 bike fits and never got a tip. So I don't know that it's
salty.
But when we look at it in the big scheme of things, I mean, it's a service, it's a knowledge, to Mike's point, you know?
I don't think it would be necessarily. How many times have you been tipped for bike service when people come in and you charge them?
A handful of times.
Right, exactly. So it's probably one of those things, like a handful of times. I think tips are.
I know many other mechanics that are tipped all the time.
Some people will get tipped.
Maybe I got to think that
it's very uncommon.
Either we don't draw the customers that would think to tip us, or I don't do the kind of service that is tip worthy. Or people just don't think about it.
I think there's one thing that's a difference too.
There's one thing that's a difference too that I think actually does play into some people's mentality on it, and that's that I'm the owner of my business, and people know that I'm the owner of my business, and I don't think they necessarily feel as obligated to tip when you're the owner. And I don't want to tip, to be honest with you, unless you're going to hand it to me in cash and it's a small amount. Or, what I really want in tips. You know what I really want in tips?
Beer.
No. I once upon a time, maybe a long time ago, what do I get jealous of right now?
Sydney's cookies.
Every goddamn week, Doug Bauer is taking time out of his day as a mechanic, taking a picture of the cookies that Sydney has baked and brought in for him, and he's taking a picture of it and sending it to us as a text. That I would like to see. I don't need a lot of cookies.
I could second that. Her confectionery prowess is second to none.
Having something
stellar
baked by her would be amazing.
Speaking of beer as a tip, I never really understood the whole premise. Like, dude, every event you go to is so catered around beer. Cycling and beer. Oh, tip with beer. We need beer. Like,
I get it and I understand it, but to me, it's kind of like having
we drink that much.
Culture.
Do you guys drink that much in the shops? Like, is that like a thing?
It's a cultural thing, and it's. I don't want to say it's phasing out. It's not as popular as it was. I will say, some of that is, quite honestly, you end up running into individuals that are working in those situations in areas that don't want beer. Either they don't consume alcohol, they've made the choice not to consume alcohol, and they don't want it sitting around. Doug would be pretty open and say he doesn't want alcohol sitting around. I know almost as many people that don't want alcohol around as that accept it, but it's part of the culture of what we do. Everyone thinks that, mechanics are these wizards, with long beards that sit in the corner of bike shops that drink, IPAs, and that's what fuels their rage and anger.
Some guys ask for that, right? I mean, I've given beer because the guys asked for that, But.
I have received many beer tips over the years.
It's just interesting that that's what they think is like what you want, beer.
People, I mean, I've had pro riders that will come up and that are like, I'll re-glue a tubular, during Super Week or something, or in Telly. And they'll be like,
gesture. It's the gesture, right?
Yeah. They're like, hey, thanks for, I want to say thank you. So, what kind of beer do you drink? That's what they always say. And I go, any, whatever.
I gave you a 12-pack last year.
Yeah.
Right towards the end of cross season.
I don't want to say I don't want that. I mean, if you're going to give me a tip, I would definitely take that. And any tip is always appreciated. So, but yeah, it's cultural. I think it's just part of the culture why we do the beer thing. It's kind of like we don't think it's weird either, but it would be like tipping your car mechanic a pack of cigarettes back in the 80s or something. Yeah,
that's another valid
what's wrong
point.
with that?
That would have been cool.
Here's a pack of Luckies for you. Thanks.
Yeah, Marlboro Reds.
You never take a car mechanic beer. That's not a thing. So how did it become such a thing in cycling?
Right.
I'm just curious. I don't have a problem with it. I just find it strange.
There's a part of it too where we sit there and we say you don't really make a lot of money in this industry, and bike shop employees tend to be one of the lower paid on the whole rung for everything. And what's to say that it didn't come into fashion because a lot of mechanics over the years like to get enough beer to be able to drown out their misery in life in general.
The work day.
Yeah. I mean,
so some guy just started asking for beer, and that became like a thing over time. Enough guys were asking for beer because they hated their life as mechanics.
Beer culture and cycling culture run on parallel lines. They're kind of one and the same in a lot of ways. I also like to think that beer culture, or cycling culture, and coffee culture are also very similar in that regard as well too.
You never take people coffee. That's a good point. Like, there's so many things you could take beyond beer. Like, what would you want? Okay, you have cookies and we have beer, but what would you want other than those two things?
What would
Cash? A pizza? Here's a tip pizza.
Shoulder to cry on.
Even the pizza, it's like, who can eat it, what's on it, hey, I'm a vegetarian, you get into all those issues anymore, and not anymore. I mean, you've always had it. It's just, it's more of an issue now. I think more that we're conscious of it.
Maybe some fruit basket.
I would
fruit basket.
I wouldn't eat it. My son would.
You wouldn't eat a fruit basket?
No.
So don't bring you a fruit basket.
I don't eat fruits.
Or vegetables.
Maybe that's a problem.
Maybe there's a reason why I'm this big. No, my kids eat a lot of fruit and vegetables.
Cheese
is
a vegetable?
Nice. Cheese is my vegetable.
Jesus.
I like cheese. Yeah. Who doesn't like cheese?
There's a few eating vegetable jokes.
We'll bring you a cheese tip. That's what you need, cheese tip.
I don't need cheese. Yeah, giant cheese wheel.
So, that would be the
Here's my cheese wheel from Dairyland.
Do you remember do that in Dairyland?
Yeah.
Do they still do that in Dairyland?
I think they still do.
Yeah, you get on the podium in the summer and you get this nice warm wheel of cheese. It's great.
Yeah.
It's a really nice
cheese.
Is
awesome.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
I have heard from people who have had it. I want to say
I drank a lot of chocolate milk one year.
Yeah.
That's a great
it was good.
thing
I love
to give
chocolate.
out.
I will say that ice cold chocolate milk for recovery after your race in that
chugging
cooler
it up on
is
the
pretty
podium
good.
is the best,
Those were
the best.
I got to give you guys credit on that one. I
don't.
I'm not I used to be a chocolate milk fan when I was much younger, but I couldn't do it now.
You guys all drink milk?
Chocolate milk.
Nope.
I do.
I will take the raging flatulence afterwards for chocolate milk because it's.
I do not.
I don't get any flatulence. I'll drink a half gallon on a ride anytime. I'm a big milk drinker, right?
Yeah, I don't get flatulence either from it. I can drink milk all day long. I now understand more of the implications on why maybe I shouldn't drink milk.
I'm glad we're using the proper nomenclature for farting.
Yeah, there you go. Flatulence.
Gassy.
I'm going to break the wind.
Anyways, I'm sure we didn't meet here to talk about all this. What are we talking about today?
No,
What's
see, that's the thing.
Rob?
We always derail instantly, which is fabulous. I absolutely love it.
This is good. We're actually inside of the double-digit mark now, changing subjects.
Nice. I like that. So, the big thing that we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
Mike doesn't actually know much about this, I don't think. We shared a little bit of the headline, but what is her Kristen? Kristen.
I just told it to you.
Should have written it down.
Pardon us all.
Pro racer that ended up third at Strada Bianche this 2 weekends ago.
Kristen Faulkner.
There you go.
Excuse me. Sorry, people.
It became apparent pretty quickly afterwards. It kind of went around online that she had participated and completed the race wearing a continuous glucose monitoring device. And then there was some question as to that, because there is a very explicit UCI rule that says, in essence, that you can't do it. We can talk a little bit about the rule here in a little bit, but that you can't wear it. And so there was some question, though, as to whether or not the nuances of what she was doing would allow her to be able to still compete legally. And she did take third on the day. They reviewed it after the fact, and they have come out with their ruling, and they have disqualified her from the race. And they have disqualified her from the race, citing the rule. And the rule, in essence, I don't know if we want to dig up the actual rule and read it, but you did earlier, but it was that you can't, it forbids in competition use of devices that can provide
physiological data
outside of heart rate.
To include lactate
levels
and blood glucose.
Yeah, blood sugar levels.
Yeah. It was specifically put into
but
place.
not limited to.
But not limited to.
Mm-hmm.
So any bio or metabolic data, collecting data from a metabolic device during competition is expressly forbidden. Expressly. Yeah, I don't know. I'm tongue-tied today.
Let's go with that. That's good.
Yeah. So she was thrown out for that. And then she published a statement late yesterday, earlier this morning. I think it was late last night, that basically gave her reasoning for what she did. And in essence, what it boils down to is she's saying she had put it on. She did not think that she was going to race the race. She uses a continuous glucose monitoring device. We can talk about that, why, in a little bit. But she had put it on. Did not think that she was racing Strada Bianche. Got a call up from the team, like the next day, and was going to go and do it. She was like, I just put this thing on. It's the last one that I have. They aren't cheap, 75 euros a piece to do for each one. They aren't cheap, and it's the last one that I have, and they come from the U.S., and I'm in Spain. And they last for 2 weeks. I don't want to be deprived of the usage of this device for 2 weeks. So is it okay if I wear it? She asked a team member, support staff on her team, is it okay if I wear it but don't collect data from it during the race? Because of how the rule is written, it seems as though it would be okay as long as you weren't collecting the data. The UCI, so that's why she wore it during the race, and why she decided not to remove it before the race. The UCI reviewed it, and even though their rule explicitly states as long as you can't collect the data from such a device, and that's the disqualifying factor, she was still disqualified. Now, after the fact, we look at the actual device itself, and the reality is that device has memory on board that can store that data for up to 8 hours without having to communicate with the device to download it. So regardless of whether or not she was actually utilizing the data in race, she was collecting the data just through the default of the device itself. It seems.
I don't think it stores it that way, though.
It has onboard memory, so that in other words, like if it's talking to your phone, so a continuous glucose monitor, a lot of people have probably heard of before, because they are utilized by individuals that have diabetes usually, and it's to help them get a firm hold on how their blood glucose fluctuates throughout the day and based on what they're eating and their sleep schedules and everything else. And those devices will communicate with apps on a phone, download their data, Bluetooth, whatever, to the phone itself to track data and trends over the long term. And then
or just in real time, just like, what is my blood sugar right now? Do I need to eat or not?
And so,
so huge advantage from an athletic.
Well, and that's the thing. Standpoint. So it was designed obviously with a disease implication and as a treatment to be able to real time monitor your blood glucose. If it loses contact with the phone at any point in time, it has to have some onboard memory to be able to store some data and information so that when it reconnects later, it will transmit that. It's not like it's sitting there transmitting nonstop all the time unless you go and actually look for the information from the device. If it did that, it'd have a huge ass battery on it. Probably has a very small battery in it, if it even has a battery. I don't know how those things work. But the idea being that this particular device was, do we know for sure whether or not it was part of the Smart Sapiens or whatever they call it?
Super Sapiens.
Yes,
Super
Sapiens.
Sapiens.
So,
brand.
and this is a brand that is providing, or with the idea of having these available to athletes to be able to continuously monitor their blood glucose so that they can see how their metabolism is working either during training and or racing situations or recovery or what have you. Yes, that's the basic idea.
Sounds about right.
And, I've been thinking for a long time. I remember 10, 12 years ago thinking to myself, insulin doping, or I don't want to call it doping, I'm sorry, but utilizing and controlling your blood glucose level would have a definite performance benefit. And I just thought that was interesting because I was like, is that necessarily against the spirit of competition? Or is it just a normal bodily function that you're utilizing and manipulating in the same way you do when you eat or how you sleep or anything else? So there's a lot of controversy surrounding this, and there's some discussion. For a lot of people, I think it's going to be a very quick choice. She violated the rules. She should have taken it off. Sorry, next day. And there's other people that look at it and go, why is the rule that way? Was she really truly in violation of the rule? Should she have been disqualified? Or what role does this device really play?
Okay.
And should it play?
So you're right about the storage of the data for 8 hours after. So whether or not she used it during competition, right? She either has it going to her phone. She's not looking at her phone. She's not looking at her watch. I didn't see a watch on her wrist, right? And she's not using... I don't think was it going to her computer?
She had a computer
she said it wasn't.
On her bars, but she said she was not sending the data to her computer. Now, the computer was a giant branded computer that was made by Stages.
Which is not compatible with the CGM, so you cannot get that.
The Wahoo is not compatible.
There is a bike computer out there that apparently does
Garmin.
pick up that data,
Garmin.
but it's not the one she had. But it seems like that's all really irrelevant. The fact is she was not allowed to have this thing on her arm, period, no matter whether it was connected to anything or not.
But think about that
for a second. That's kind of a moot point.
Okay, go on. Let me hear the point you're trying to make because
that's the UCI's point is that wearing the device, regardless of what you're doing with it, is banned. Period.
But that's not how the rule reads. It says that you can't take data from a device in competition.
Well, then the UCI is within their rules if it stores data for 8 hours, which is what the website says. So if it's storing the data from the race and you can go back and analyze that data the same way you would analyze your power profile, so how is a power meter not in the same realm then?
We posed that question to each other. Yeah.
Wait a second. The UCI, we got to pull that rule up. So the UCI rule says what, Rob? Sorry, Leah, I interrupted you there. What does the UCI rule say?
I'm looking it up.
Leah had it up earlier. It's interesting we'll find it and have her read it, but it's interesting to look at it and think about it. So this is why a lot of people had issue with it because they're like, well, if you follow the letter of the rule, you could make the case that she should not have been disqualified, that what she did was not against the rule. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. The UCI makes whatever decision that it wants to make. If you don't agree with the decision after the fact, what are you going to do? Sue them? Go ahead and take them to court. Sue them.
I mean, the other thing. What about like other riders that don't the diabetic riders use these? Aren't they using them?
Use them in competition.
Yeah, I wonder how like the Novo Nordisk team does it. That team's
if you have a medical, exactly.
We have quite a few ties in with the old Team Type 1 including the old director who's on our team. And I have not had a chance to ask him, but I should be talking to him here within the week. And I want to ask him kind of what their regulations were. I don't know that when they were racing, they necessarily had such wide access to continuous glucose monitoring devices.
It probably didn't exist back then.
I think they had them, but they were very expensive. I don't know if they necessarily used them in competition. I know that I have seen diabetic athletes over the years really struggle with controlling blood sugar and understanding how it works and how it impacts them in racing situations. And I've always thought it was a huge disadvantage to them, even to be on a level playing field without having those kind of devices. So it's like, I don't want to see, me personally, I would not want to see anybody that I am competing with not being able to use devices that keep them healthy and at a baseline. Now, at the pro tour level,
I mean,
this is why I don't make decisions at a pro tour level.
It's basically like having a fuel tank monitor, right?
Yes, having a fuel gauge on your bike.
Like when do you need to put in the nitrous oxide? When are you putting in the sugar? That's essentially what it is. Oh, I'm getting low, I should eat. So the data.
Yeah, but sorry.
But to your point, you were saying earlier, you were like, you got to know your body.
Yeah, I think, my perspective is if you're a paid athlete at that level, you've been training for a very long time to get to that level, right? You've had people in your corner that have taught you how to train the way you need to train to be successful at that level. You should know the warning signs of when your body needs fuel. Baseline, you should know it. I'm an amateur and I know the signs of, I've got hardly any training to the level that these people have. And I know the signs of when my body's losing energy and I need it. I've been fortunate enough to hone into that over the years. And I think someone at that level should know those signs and not have to use a monitor like this. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not just, and I think the issue here is that it's not just about fueling. And
right,
for her specific implication, and this is one where I don't want to overspeak on it because I'm not her and I don't know.
Right.
But she was implying that the information and data was extremely important to her on a personal level because of her personal health in terms of fueling. I don't want to say this inappropriately and stop me if I do, but fueling her cycle in essence.
Okay, that could be a thing. But if this is going to be in the media, in the public view, then you need to be transparent and give that information up, whether you want to or not.
What information?
What she's using it for.
I mean, I don't know that she actually specifically said that she
didn't
was using it specifically, but she said that these are important for use by women to make sure that they are fueling themselves properly to avoid disruptions to menstrual cycle. Whether or not she specifically was concerned about that or not, I don't know. But that is one of the implications for it. That is.
That device did not get her. Sorry, I did it again. Leah,
go for it.
Go.
I mean, that device.
Do you want the actual wording here?
Sure.
Devices which capture other physiological data, including any metabolic values, such as, but not limited to, glucose or lactate, are not authorized in competition.
Capture. I didn't hear that before. Capture. This device captured the data.
Correct.
So
yeah,
I think
stored it for 8 hours.
That's pretty cut and dry.
That's the
at
word.
That point.
Tracking.
Yeah,
it's just a different form of tracking.
And it uses metabolic.
She literally said capture, and it does capture the data. It keeps it on board.
I don't care whether she has a computer that doesn't have the function on it. She can't see it in race, whatever. There's someone within that team that has that app that is looking at it and going, "Hey, Kristen, you've burned a lot of energy. Maybe now is time to take good nutrition." In her microphone that's in her ear.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're using it like that as a performance-enhancing tool, right, as to optimize your performance, then yeah, that's illegal. Storing it is illegal. Like your Garmin is storing your heart rate. That's your big. It's not tracking. Like you have a device that is measuring your metabolic input and output along with your lactate. Is it measuring lactate too? So the data that you get from that, it's not measuring the lactate.
There are devices similar to this.
Yeah, it's just measuring the sugar. Yeah. So, like you'd have to go back and really study the data. Does it make you a better bike rider after or a better racer after? When do you eat optimally? You can study the power file to the metabolic file. Sure. But in the race, that device didn't get her third. It didn't. I mean, even if she ate,
yeah, you would assume it.
Even if she would have eaten optimally, like eat now, eat now, like it wouldn't matter. I mean, I don't think.
There's a lot of implications that I think blood sugar level has for in race and in competition. It's obviously enough that the UCI has seen fit to put a preemptive rule in place.
Well, they got to start somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying the UCI is infallible by any means. At one point in time, this would have been illegal, in competition.
But what kind of stuff are they missing with it? Like what else can you test with that data? What else does that data show? Is there any way to use that data in terms of a biological passport application? Where every team has access to it, and all of a sudden you're tracking this information to see who's doing what.
You absolutely could. I think that would have a lot of information.
I don't know enough about the science or enough about the device to see if that's even possible, or metabolic, like understanding of
I would like
indication
to think,
of doping, but still.
I don't think the UCI really was even thinking about there. They're like, oh, new technology, this all fancy, expensive stuff. Let's ban it.
I don't think so. I really don't. I think they understand the implication of being equipped with that level of metabolic knowledge. In addition to think about lactate. If you had real-time lactate level information while you're racing, and you had enough study and data and information behind it to be able to modify your performance, this is the same as not being able to race with your data in front of you at the track.
Well, when they banned radios, Garmin back in the day, when they had the ability to send text messages from the phone to the Garmin head units, they could still communicate via the technology. That was never banned.
Sneaky.
It was kind of sneaky, yeah, but it was functional. It's the same thing as having a radio. He's like, hey, you got 5 minutes up the road. Let's close a gap to whatever. But that was a good use of the technology for them to do that. It is I would like to try one of these devices. I think they're fascinating. I think they're really interesting. And I will reiterate, I don't think she won or got third in that race just because she was wearing this device. But the data after the fact does allow someone to go back and say, hey, if I'd eaten here, or optimize this or optimize that, even after just one race, you can see the power profile, how long you're in, what your heart rate is, how much expenditure and calories you've put out, what you had eaten before. You could really divulge quite a bit of information just by storing that on file for those 8 hours, even before the race starts. Where do you have dips? Where are you, at what point does, you could get a lot out of it. I don't think you necessarily need to race to have that information, though. The racing is a little bit different. And I can understand her argument also. I mean, if it's $75 a pop and you don't want to take it off for 2 weeks, I get that. But if it's storing the data for 8 hours, it is storing the data.
Yeah. So I have two questions for everybody. Number one is, did the UCI make the right decision? Number two, do you, and this is completely meaningless in the grand scheme of things, but in our opinions, do you think that she had any nefarious reason for using it, or do we take it at face value for what she said? So we'll start to the left. Leah.
What was the first question?
Did the UCI make the right decision?
Given all of the other things out there that we already use, I'm going to say no. I think that, if you're allowing heart rate and radios and power meters, and there's, I think you're already monitoring a lot of things right now that you're using while you're in the race to help you make decisions, and takes a lot of the art of racing your bicycle kind of out of it and makes it a lot more sciencey, which, I just think it's inconsistent. Personally, I would love to see all of it go away during racing. I would love to see racing have to be part,
We're gonna get back to
not just your physical prowess, but also do you know how to fuel yourself on a bike? Do you know how to read the race and make decisions and stuff like that? Oh, I think we've all kind of agreed that we'd like to see that kind of racing.
We're going to get back to those points,
right? But I think it's just inconsistent for them to ban this, but allow everything else that they allow.
So you don't think they made the right decision?
I think in making the ban, I don't think they should have made a ban on it. Did they make the right decision on disqualifying her? Yes, because the rule is very clear, and she was not in compliance. She chose to go against the rules, and that was her mistake to not get it properly clarified.
So instead of going to the second point, let's have everybody answer the first one. Do you think the UCI made the right decision?
Yeah. I mean, they put a rule in place. You got to play by the rules. So that's my short answer. I don't know if a disqualification was necessarily warranted. Maybe a fine of some sort, because now she got disqualified. An otherwise fantastic result on her resume is now stripped from her because of this, whatever you want to call it. But a rule's a rule.
On my end, I would say at one point I was saying no, they didn't make the right decision, because I believe that the rule read that basically capturing transmission of it. And I didn't think that had actually occurred or that was subjective. But if it says captures data and that device holds data for 8 hours, then by the letter of the rule, I think that she needs to be disqualified, unfortunately. I mean, she could have been fined instead of disqualified. She could have had some relegation of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, a relegation would you get last.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's other things that they could have done, but I think they sent a very clear message with disqualifying her, which to me implies that they feel like this is going to be more of an issue to racing than maybe we even understand or know at this point. So I would say, sure they made the right decision with this. I also kind of reading her take on everything, and maybe I can get into that in a little. I'll get into that in the next section. So, Mike, on to you. Do you think UCI made the right choice?
It seems like they have a very clear rule about the data collection. So, yeah, they have to start somewhere. I think the UCI probably made the right call based on the rules they have in place. Was she doing it to be nefarious and try to get a leg up in the competition?
That's the next question. We'll get to that.
Hey. Okay. All right. Well, then, yeah, the UCI.
Actually, why don't you just start it? Why don't you just start it? Yeah.
All right. UCI made the right decision. I do not think she was being nefarious in the idea that she was going to use that data to better her performance during the race. I do think she was intending on using that data after the race, though. Why would you not? Right? I mean, it's fascinating data. That by itself, if that is your intention, and that's not knowing what her intention actually is, would be across the line if that is not allowed during racing. Which is why I'm saying it's not hard to mimic data outside of racing. Racing is different, and it would have been interesting to really fine-tune the data collection and understanding of what was being done, but every race is different. But you have to start somewhere. So starting that data collection at that moment, I can see that being really beneficial. Again, I do not think she's doing it to be nefarious. I think she has the technology to do something that's very interesting and useful after the fact and during the fact to make yourself a better bike rider. But the fact that Super Sapiens probably needs to come up with one that does not do data collection but can stay on someone's arm if they can't make one that's, independently removable so you don't have any sort of system that's on your arm, but leave that device in your skin. I don't know exactly, but...
Well, then that ends up coming up with, then you got to be able to tell devices apart, and then how do you can camouflage one to look... I mean, as soon as you put a rule out there, somebody will try to figure out a way around it. Yeah. And not necessarily along with the spirit of it.
So I don't know if I clearly answered that. I think I did, but I don't think she was doing it to be, quote unquote
nefarious.
Yeah.
I'll go along, and we'll go back this direction, but I'll go along with that. I don't think that she did anything that I truly don't feel that she did anything intentionally to be nefarious along these lines. I totally see what she's saying. I totally see that she wants to have that data, and it's more from a health standpoint for herself, and that those are expensive devices that She did not have another one and didn't necessarily feel like ripping that one off, even though she just put it on. And that, let's face it, you don't get paid a hell of a lot of money being a pro racer, number one, and being on a women's team, number two. So it's not like she could just rip it off and then run down to the local store and pick up another one. The things that I have a problem with, though, are the fact that it was pretty obvious. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to realize that it stores that much data and information after you actually look at the device. I can't think that she's been using it and not know that it stored the information. The other thing being, she was a last-minute call-up for this race and ended up in third place. You know, something
that
about that.
That could happen.
I don't know, man. Something about that just kind of tickles me the wrong way.
I don't know, man. You have an excuse.
It can definitely happen.
Yeah, you have an excuse in your mind. You don't have to go perform, and all of a sudden you're third. You know,
True.
like you have a great day. True. You know.
So I would say, in general, I take what she's saying at face value. I don't think that there was any intention to violate rules or use this data in some way that other racers don't have access to. So that's my position.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with all that. Like, I don't see any ill will, but at the same time, okay, you've got this device on, you get a call, you know there's a rule in place. If I'm in her shoes, I'm ripping the thing off. I don't care if it's $75 and it's hard to get. We can figure that out later. Because now I've taken a great result in a World Tour race and thrown it away because I didn't want to take a patch off that gives me some data. Right? That's just my perspective. And let's keep this in mind. If she didn't get third and she got dropped and she was 100th, we wouldn't be talking about this because the cameras wouldn't be on her. So are there other women or men for that reason in the peloton using the same device, but they're not getting up on the podium and they're not in the cameraman's eye or on the television or any other, viewpoint?
That was one of my first thoughts they found her because it was on her arm, and there was a lot of pictures of that. How many people are not putting it on their arm?
Right.
I don't think it works anyplace.
Yeah. Oh, I've only ever seen them installed on your arm.
Yeah, I have too. But I mean, I'm trying to think. There's got to be some other way. I've seen some CGMs that are along the waist, but those are usually built into insulin pumps or some sort.
Yeah, we'd have to understand why the placement is on the arm. I mean, subdermal tissue. Why is the arm some optimal place?
I mean, if you're a diabetic, you can shoot yourself in the butt or shoot yourself in the stomach. How come people don't put it on their stomachs and it's totally concealed?
Left cheek.
Yes. Well, that would be uncomfortable if you're on a saddle for 6 hours.
And it would be visible. Also, but if you have it on your stomach,
right.
You don't see anything.
It'd be hard to see.
Didn't she ask the team ahead of time? Didn't she?
She did.
So it's not even really on her.
I don't know who. Somebody on the team. She didn't say who.
She said somebody that I trust.
Right.
In essence.
Well, I wonder how that trust relationship is now.
We were joking about that earlier. It was like, did she ask the mechanic? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That would be a problem. I mean, if you didn't ask the right person, that is a problem. I mean, if someone, if the team doesn't know, and they should dig into that. I mean, it's their own fault.
I mean, that's a discussion with management, not just a soigneur or somebody like that. Management and the doctor.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Leah?
I don't think it was nefarious, just poor judgment.
I got to look up that word.
Nefarious?
Yeah.
That's basically heading out with ill intention at heart.
Okay. Pardon my ignorance, people.
So
sorry.
You're heading out to cause evil and
mischief.
Ne'er-do-well intentionally.
But we were all. I also brought something else up earlier. Along the lines of this continuous glucose monitor that we have, along the lines of being the athlete and knowing your body well, and having people in place to support you in that, and monitor all these things in training and your diet and all the other things that go into being a professional cyclist. It brought me back to a memory I had of last year of seeing information on Matthew Vanderpool's stem. Not on what climbs are coming, where the cobble section is, where this is, where that is, but dietary information. Like, hey, eat 2 gels at this point in the race, have a bottle with electrolytes in it at this point in the race, have another 2, because I think they did a small little report. I don't remember what the race was, maybe the Giro, I don't know. But I did see it, and I was like, that's interesting. Normally there would be course information there, but this is his dietary needs or his caloric needs for the race. That was interesting to me. Like that, why couldn't you just do that?
Yeah, I think you absolutely could. I don't know, Mike, what did you like to race with on your stem?
I mean, the dietary stuff it's interesting that was on the stem. I mean, I don't see that much different than, information on the route, right? A kilometer this, kilometer that. I think that's actually interesting, but it also could be indicative of those guys doing that kind of research prior, under this kind of load, this is an optimal amount of fuel source for this amount of time. And that is much more fair sounding using a device like the Super Sapiens device outside of racing to understand what the dietary needs are under strain of training or racing. And then putting that into a regiment on the bike when you're racing of what nutrition to take and when. I think that's really interesting. And maybe that's what she should have done. I don't know. I agree with you guys 100% that there are many other people, and maybe this is why they came down on her so hard, using that device that is not being shown. She just might be the first one who got,
somebody's got to
wearing
somebody's got to be the guinea pig.
It's almost like it's been known, it's been happening. It's probably a common thing that a lot of people are doing. And then all of a sudden,
it's useful information, man. I mean, I have a buddy of mine.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody's felt burned by that and just saw coverage, was like, hey, you know what? That's obvious. Let's get this one, out in the open.
Well, the best reasoning, to my understanding, the best reasoning that the UCI has given against it and why they banned it was just because it's an additional cost that not everybody would have access to.
That's
and
dumb. A pair of
that
socks
was
costs
their
the
reasoning, which is kind of lame, really.
When you look at how much an actual bike cost and
Super Sapiens has
doing,
pretty much come out and said, hey, we'll provide these for free to every single team. Of course they will, because they want to.
There was something you mentioned earlier in the day when we were talking about this, when you were reading about it. You said the UCI is basically along these lines, trying to limit the impact of the expenditure, but also they're trying to limit the impact of electronic devices on racing itself.
Are they?
That was their quoted intention. And that takes us back to, when power meters came on the scene, or how you can't look at your data when you're racing on the track, or how, I'm sure heart rate monitors at the beginning were probably a little bit of looked at with a questionable eye. And to Mike's point earlier, and I said we would get back to this, about radios, race radios, the impact of electronic devices on races themselves. And we were mentioning earlier, it would be great to see racing get back to what we think it was.
Right.
Where it wasn't all radios and everything else. That it was down to the racer knowing their body, knowing the situation, and being able to race from their gut.
Mike, when you were racing, how often did you find yourself annoyed by the radio? Did you ever just pull it out because you were sick of listening to the chatter?
Not so much the chatter. I mean, if you were getting, told to do something that you didn't think was a good idea, I think the biggest annoyance was comfort when it was in your back pocket or on your thing, or when it wasn't working, or you had someone get their mic stuck open,
I could see that. Okay.
It was a highly useful tool, to be able to communicate with the car, let them know you needed a bottle, to communicate with other riders, to understand what's up the road. You didn't have to pay attention anymore, right? So it was definitely a useful tool. I liked having the radios for that reason, because we were a highly functional team with that communication. But without the radios, and this has been talked about, I'm sure, many, many times before.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely changes the racing, because you don't have to rely on paying attention. You don't have to rely on certain characteristics that make the race so dynamic without the use of the technology, right? But when you think about it, it also plays quite a bit of a safety component. So what is, racing already is inherently dangerous, especially racing in Europe, man. The roads are tight. There's a lot of road furniture. You have huge caravans. Yeah. You're going all over the place. So, if the lead commissaire says that, there is, emergency vehicles at this, or, train crossing here, or whatever, that there's a train, unscheduled event, or, some accident, it can be relayed to you right away from the car. So, in terms of safety, and I think that's a huge proponent for radios. In terms of race outcome, I definitely think it affects the race outcome when you have communication like that, especially from the outside looking in. I mean, most of these directors have TVs with live streaming in their car. They use all the technology possible. So they have, right in the moment information. So I definitely think it impacts it that way for sure. But I like using them. I was privy to using them before all this stuff was really taking place. So of course I'd like using it, but I do think that it does affect the outcome of the race in some situations.
Sorry, I'm just sitting here thinking. I obviously.
Yeah, I'll say one other thing. I'll say one other thing too.
And I don't.
What's that?
I'm just saying. I'm not here to like pass judgment and say, oh yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you've done it. I don't. So I have to take what you say as the word of God, basically.
I was at the U.S. Pro Time Trial Championships, and I had a radio in, and Vaughters was following me in the follow car. And he could tell me how far I was behind. He could encourage me to stay on the gas going over the climb. It was like having someone else's positive mindset. Go, dude. Go, dude. Yeah. You're close. Keep it going. Keep it going. Struggle through it. I know you're struggling. Stand, shift a gear, sit. Like that level of communication in your head when you're racing, especially an event like a time trial, let alone a road race, when you have someone else in your head, is highly valuable. Because that's a weak point within yourself. Oh, I'm sucking. I'm not doing good enough. I'm going slow. Like, dude, you're going fast. I was following another rider. They're going this speed at this pace, at this point in the race, like the winds change, guys. Let's get to the front and chase, whatever, or split the group. There's so much information that can be relayed via radio in addition to the safety information that keeps the peloton safe, that it's hard to, that's why it is banned. What level is this banned at? Because they still allow radios, don't they?
They still allow radios, but it's nothing below
a certain caliber of race.
I think UCI is the only
no,
level.
There's U.S. teams. And that kind of begs the question. Every year, like in Intelli
racing,
every year in Intelli, you see a bunch of like. I could be very careful how I say this.
Be nice, Rob. Be nice.
You see collections of individuals wearing the same jersey that are on teams that maybe a lot of people wouldn't consider to be professional teams, but they consider themselves to be professional teams. And they are equipping, setting up, running, and using radios. And you can tell for them it's like a novelty and really just kind of putting it on because they feel like it's part of the uniform that makes them important. So and I've always wondered, for a lot of these teams, most of them are shot out the back, very early on. It's like, did they have the radios just so they could tell each other, hey, I'm getting dropped now? Because it's not like they're really discussing the tactics of the race. It's like, why bother with the radio? At your level, I think it'd be more confusing than helpful. But there are so many on the U.S. crit scene that really go, oh, it's about the safety. It's about this. We have to have it. And they really push back hard whenever anybody talks about removing them. And they say, we got to have it. We got to have it for the safety. And that's always the primary thing. It's a crit.
You're going in the same course.
It's the same corner that it was 100 laps ago.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. And a criterium, what's the point of having a radio? You should be able to see what's going on. You're going lap after lap past a staging area where you can have communication from your director yelling at you. You need to know what the heck you're doing in the race to begin with. As a team, you should know what you're doing, when you're doing it. You should have had a team meeting before. You should know what's going on. You should be able to communicate during. You shouldn't be so spread out that you can't somehow communicate. It definitely changes the dynamic. I can see in a U.S. road race why the safety does matter, and why
road
that
race,
is.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a criterium,
sure.
Yeah, that's silly. There is a beauty of bike racing that's a lot like playing chess. You got to know the moves. You got to calculate the moves. You got to know when to make the move. You got to, read the race so you know when to make the move and know when to bury it. There's so much, and that's what makes it so dynamic. It's definitely a large part of it, so.
Mm-hmm. These guys in this photo here, they're reading the race. There's no radios there.
That's because the radio then would have been this big.
It always, yeah, right. It makes me think how much the technology would have changed races. I know this isn't a fair comparison, but I instantly think of '89 with Le Mans, in the Tour and winning by 8 seconds. If the follow car from Fignon had real-time data, streaming information, and had been able to radio to Fignon, who would have won that year,
Well, that's the year of the air bars, right?
Yeah.
You got it by 8 seconds, right?
He won overall by 8 seconds.
I mean, that's a good example, Rob. That's literally
Fignon
the same thing I was saying with JV. You're talking about a time trial. You're talking about you're talking about information going across. And I mean, at 8 seconds,
he had time splits. I don't want to say he didn't have time splits. He was given time splits during that race. And there was information communicated to him throughout the race. He had talked about it after the fact. But he didn't have anybody in his ear. They did have the team car. He did say the team car was yelling at him at different points. But it wasn't like, to your point, like having a JV in your ear going, dude, come on, push this, do that. They
would have been yelling out of the car.
You're going to be done by 8 seconds. They
would have been yelling out of the car. They would have honked on the horn if he was close. There would have been some form of communication for sure. There would have been people on the course, potentially, giving the time splits. It's not the same as having a race radio in your ear where you can stay in the position and getting the information you need. I do think it probably would have favored Fignon for sure. 8 seconds is not very long.
No, it's not. And the actual full change was 50 some odd seconds, because he was Le Mans was behind by 40 or 50 seconds at the start of the stage.
Airbar is definitely made.
Oh yeah, he definitely had performance advantages, but a race is a race. I mean, if you never doubt a Frenchman, who's going for the Tour on the last stage with the time trial, which, by the way, it's going back to a time trial for the last stage.
Really?
This year or next year?
2024.
There you go. Next year.
I'm excited. I was watching Paris-Nice, and
it's pretty good, right?
Yeah, I mean, those guys are smashing. It'll be interesting to see how do you say his name? Pogacar? Pogacar? How do you say his name?
Just say Toddy.
Toddy.
Pogacar.
How do you say?
Pogacar.
Pokemon.
I always say Pokemon. I always think of Charizard whenever I say Pogacar.
He
was dominant. He's dominant, Paris-Nice, across the spectrum, sprinting, climbing, aggressiveness. It'll be interesting to see the tour.
I still got some training time to catch up on.
Well,
yeah, he's good.
He won.
He's
Rob.
very good.
I know how it ends. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The tour will be exciting this year. It's funny. I'm much more into cycling, partially because you guys get me talking every week about it, but also
there you go.
Helping Gwen back there, with coaching and then riding again. I am much more paying attention to the world of cycling than I have in the last 8 years since I retired.
That makes me happy because
yes.
I wondered that myself. I was thinking about it probably a week ago. I was like, I wonder why Mike just doesn't follow it when someone was that, and knowing what I know about your career and how it all came to, its end and everything. I understood it, but I kind of had the same feeling with BMX. I was like, I turned my back on it. I didn't follow it for years, for decades. I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. And I never paid attention. So I wondered if it was, along the same lines. But it's cool that you're paying attention to it again.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Well, it's partially since that accident I had in November where I was laid up for 2.5 months, I had a lot of time to think about, things and, but, also just talking about it and getting excited about it. And then when you retire from cycling and you move on and in this, in your life, there's a lot of other things in your life that are interesting and fascinating and you have to do with your time to make things work because things are different now. And it's easy to lose sight of that when you're focused on the other things and it's just not as important, right? It's not as much of a focus in your life. It's also a very niche world that I spent a lot of time doing. So I was just ready to be out of it. I do find, my retirement, it wasn't the way I wanted to end it, but it was not an awful way. At some point you have to stop, right? At the end of the day, you have to stop. So I think I don't have a clear answer other than that I've been thoroughly enjoying just riding again and getting back into the swing of things and thinking about the sport more dynamically. And often it's funny, you guys, invited to me to be a guest host on this to talk about stuff. But, I have let go of a lot of stuff. I don't remember a lot of things and I have, things come back here and there, but I'm not up to speed on a lot of the teams that are racing anymore. I'm not up to speed on a lot of the stuff that, the technology, I do other things like peddling mines or making art or, other work that I do, so there's just other things in my life.
You mean there's more to life than actually paying attention to what's going on with bikes?
Yeah. A lot more to life. Yeah.
Maybe
that's my entire life.
Maybe I'm doing life wrong.
Well, yeah, no, you're not. I mean, it's easy to get enveloped into something you really enjoy doing, passionately. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. So,
well, that is great to hear, and I do love hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it kind of leads me into, with you saying you're paying more attention to what's going on, it leads me into a little segment I wanted to try. Who is your favorite pro racer? Or favorite racer, I'll say.
Yolanda Neff.
There you go.
Oh, do we have to break them down by discipline? Because I could do that.
No, you just throwing out. Right now, we're going to have no rules with this. It's an open competition for yourself. You get to choose who you think the best racer is, and you can talk about it while you pick them if you want, or you can just throw out a name and just say, stew on that and walk away.
I mean, you didn't ask me to elaborate.
No, I think this is going to sound bandwagonish, but I have my reasons. I would say, wow.
This week. Wow.
This week, last week, 5 years ago.
I'm going to keep asking you this every week, though. So are we going to just start skipping you in the future?
I'm not one to just go, dude, this guy won this race. He's my favorite now. I don't jump the shark like that.
I'm not saying your favorite racer of the week. So it can be for any reason, and it doesn't mean your favorite racer overall. Just your favorite racer of the week. Somebody you were thinking of.
Wow.
Okay. Any particular thing about Wow this week that made you decide that?
Wow taught me how to race cyclocross through YouTube, and then I watched him fall on his butt, rip his pants open, and give Tom Pidcock a handshake and admit that it was his fault.
Yeah. And then
sportsmanship.
Yeah, when they had the wreck, and but now Pidcock is out of
Pidcock is out of
San
Remo with a concussion.
Yeah,
from Terreno.
From that wreck.
I think from that wreck.
Yeah, we don't know for sure. They aren't really saying, but it seems like it.
That's good. The team pulled him from that.
But you could ask me next week, and I'll give you the same answer.
And that's a really good point, Mike. That it's good that the team did that. I think we're starting to see more and more of that, and all the feedback I've gotten that I've seen about him pulling out because of the concussion is everyone applauding the team for making that choice and making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, you look at football, get back in there.
Yeah. Some of that's changing, but I still...
Yeah, but they're far behind.
Yeah. I don't think they're ever
CTE is not something to take lightly, and you keep putting these people back in, and they keep suffering these concussions. It doesn't take much to get a concussion, a slight little bop of the head. You hit your head on the corner of the cabinet while you're doing dishes or something, and boom, that's your brain rattling around in your skull.
Yeah.
While you might not feel it, that's affecting you.
It's not going to happen as much with me because I have big wall small brain ratio, so there's a lot of floating room in there.
I've had my bell rung several times throughout my entirety of my life, and a lot of times I probably should have sat out. I hadn't, and I never went to get a concussion. I never got concussion protocol or anything like that. So I'd like to say it ties into some of the depressive feelings I get, sometimes
absolutely
in life, and I'm aware of that. So I guess I got that going for me.
I have a lot of direct experience with a couple people very close to me in my life that have had a lot of issues with concussion, and I've seen the improvements from some of the treatments out there and how much it affects mood and a lot of stuff. Yeah,
there's been a lot of people in BMX that I've been friends with that have killed themselves because they have had many concussions, and it's super sad when it hits that close to home.
Dave Mira, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a number of athletes that have. There was just an article, and I think it was on CNN that ran that one, talking about that exact same thing.
It's not a happy place to be, and I feel for anyone that is dealing with it. It's an ugly place.
And I've known quite a few riders and racers over the years that have left the sport because of the number of concussions that they've had. and it's whatever, it's not necessarily like they were going out and doing anything wrong. Sometimes it's just kind of the shake of how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happens that many times, and I'm hoping that more and more people are equipped with the knowledge to be able to step back and go, I need to not just, shove this under the rug. I need to think about this and the implications for my long-term health. So,
right.
I'll never forget the first time I had a concussion. I mean, that's that picture I showed you guys a couple weeks ago. That was the first time.
I thought that was a point you forget.
No,
I can remember the majority of my concussions.
What did you say, Rob? You thought
I thought the point of a concussion was that you forget it.
You're not necessarily
I understand
knocked
that's
out.
not true, but
yeah, you're not necessarily knocked out. It's just you rattle your brain. You have a brute.
Brain hits your skull.
I think I've had two, but I say I think because I never had either one of them looked at. But one I'm pretty positive. When I called my wife after I hit the deck, and then 3 minutes later called her again, had the same conversation.
And it's not necessarily the brain hitting the skull. It's actually farther. It's deeper inside. Yeah. The stretching, everything is really elastic. So yeah, I mean that does happen. That's where you can get some bruising or some bleeding, or but it's farther inside where you get the damage.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's moving, but it's because it's all attached, right? So if you have a mass moving, it moves off this point. It's that point that's stretching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also too, like you're saying, the edge too. I mean, it depends on the severity of the accident. But I mean, I remember not being okay. I remember consciously knowing I had to go, and I was out of the race. I remember, and it took me a month to get back into training because I had headaches every time I tried to ride. You just stop riding. Yep. You just stop. Your brain's too important. Fuck cycling.
Yep. But on that note,
well said.
I mean, when I say that, in the moment, when it happens, I love cycling. But in the moment when you have the concussion and you just hit your head hard enough that you might think you have a concussion, fuck it. Get out of the race. Yeah. Get out of the ride. Get out of it. It's not worth it.
Well, and we've romanticized and glorified the idea that we suffer through all conditions and all situations. Well, and no matter how bad the wreck was, get back on your bike and finish the race. It's the romanticism of all of that. And, I think we need to pick up a little bit more of the soccer/football reaction.
Yeah, I will say though, as they happen through my youth and through my, 20s, 30s, and even into probably 4 years ago when I got one, I have gotten wiser to your point, Mike, where it's like, all right, something's not right here. I'm not going to continue, and pulled myself away from whatever I was doing. If you have the mindset at the time when it happens to, God, what was it? Who was the one that crashed in Torrey, California on a while ago? Oh, it was Squinge. Did you remember seeing that?
No.
Back when it was, they were in the pink and green kit. He crashed on a descent, knocked himself silly, got up, fumbled across the street, fell over.
Oh, yeah. No,
got
I
back
do
up, and
that.
then he rode off and smashed into the curb and fell over, and he finished the stage. That is frightening.
Who was that?
Been some...
Tom Squinge?
Scoogins. Yeah.
The
I don't know if I'm saying his name is right. Yeah, the guy who rides.
I don't think anybody knows how to say it but him.
He's a good dude. Horner did the same thing, right? Where they were didn't even know where they were. Dude, get out of the race, man. Yeah. It is not worth it. You're not being paid enough, and your life is way longer after the fact, doing way cooler shit. Well, depending what you do with your life, it's just not worth it. Get out of the race. And all the teams out there that, so it's good that Ineos pulled Pidcock from that, and that Pidcock is, not driving to do it.
And I'd like to say on the surface he was probably upset about it, but he understands it, and he's probably okay with, like you said, my health is much more important.
And he's won a lot of big stuff already. He's got plenty of time to continue.
Right.
It's not like it's going to be
the end
a
of
make
his
or break
deal.
Olympic champion, world champion. Yeah. One, he's got. It's not going to change his salary. Yeah, exactly.
So, along that, my current favorite of the week would be Cherie Van Anrooy.
Nice call.
I win this one. I was watching a video. There might be mud, or there will be mud, on GCN.
There might be mud,
and she was on it for a bit. It reminded me because I hadn't thought about her in a month or two since World Championships or whatever. Mm-hmm. And just hearing her talk and everything, she was already quickly becoming one of my favorite racers.
Yep.
And then to hear her talk and go through the whole thing, it was like, absolutely. My current favorite, Sherry Van Anrooy. Mike? And you can take a pass this week.
No.
Next week.
Every now and then I happen to look at cycling news, and it's not very often. But
and it doesn't have to be a current one. I'll throw that out. It could be even
occasional
any day
Instagram.
Of the week, you can just pick anybody.
We got to start over.
Yeah. Well, I hate social media too, but I have looked at that recently, and I will say that I am going to go with I'm going to go with Nielsen Paulus.
Oh, nice. Good call.
Nielsen Paulus. Yeah, I don't know him at all, but I like the way he's racing. I think he's getting some self-belief. Yeah. And I want to see him continue racing at a high level and winning.
Yeah, he's on a good trajectory
for
sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, good picks this week. For everybody watching, listening, what have you, I apologize for our technical glitches that we had this last week. Apparently, our audio dropped out towards the end of the podcast. I still have not listened through the whole thing to catch that. I might be able to dig it out at some point if somebody really wants to listen to it. Otherwise, just take my heartfelt apology for the technical glitch on that end. And hopefully this week will be a little bit better. And if you're listening, please go ahead and subscribe on whatever device you're using or whatever system you're using to download and listen, to your podcast. Outside of that, if you're watching it, or even if you don't normally watch it, go over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Go ahead and like the video when it comes out. Leave a comment or two. Believe it or not, we all listen and watch them and everything else. And
I don't listen to anything.
It does help us out.
I hate the sound of my voice. Yeah, I mean, hopefully you guys do. I don't listen to it. I show up here and then I get back to other things I'm doing. So I haven't heard my own voice. And I'm gonna say, dude, this is to anyone else who listens to this stuff. I apologize if I don't say, the right name or the right team, or if we're on subject matter. Some of this stuff isn't planned.
None of us know everything, Mike.
Well, this is not necessarily you guys. This is or everyone there. It's to the people that listen to it. If you get mad that I didn't mention your team name because we're talking about some subject matter, I'm sorry. It's just because my brain is, I'm thinking about other things, so.
Yep.
If I don't mention it,
sure.
whatever, it's like, I apologize. It's not done out of a spiteful or mean way.
Well, I mean, if you ever are in doubt of any of that, the number of people that you have pissed off by being on this podcast, I guarantee you pales in comparison to the number of people I have pissed off. Just throwing that out there.
Fact.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, Rob. I don't know. Anyways.
I do. But I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do whatever the hell all the kids say that you got to do these days. I do want to mention, I threw it out in our little thread, and I think maybe you may not have seen it, Mike, but yesterday was the 14th anniversary of your younger brother, Joel, winning his first bike race. And it was in Kenosha. It was a practice crit. I was there. I actually was in the best shape of my life, but I couldn't race because I couldn't afford it at the time. I had just lost my job. And we were out there, and Joel was racing. And every lap, he would come by, and he didn't know what to do. So he would look over at me on the sidelines and be like, what do I do? What do I do? And I'd be like, hold it close, it's hold back, don't go yet. We had talked about, technique and everything else like that. It became very apparent very quickly that I did not need to give him any kind of information, knowledge, coaching, anything, because we had said, wait until the last lap. And he had Matt Hyduke in front of him trying to lead him out for the last lap. And they go out for the last lap and we're like, yeah, now, and they go disappear. I only see him coming around the last corner. He won full sprint, no one near him. He won by over 30 seconds, 35 seconds. Got the video somewhere. And he came across. Everybody else is completely gassed. So he picked up 30, 40 seconds on the field in one lap or half a lap. And I just remember after a while going, God, I haven't seen Matt Hyduke. What ended up happening to Matt? And then sure enough, Matt comes walking out at some point and goes, hey, how'd it go? Yeah, you won, right? Yeah. It's like, well, what happened to you? He goes, dude, I was trying to lead him out. He was coming up on me so fast, and we had lap traffic that I was coming up on. He goes, it was either I hit the lap traffic or I ditch into the grass to get the hell out of his way so that he could win the race. He goes, so I picked the grass, and that's where I went. So that's what happened to Matt. No one could get out of Joel's way quick enough. So it was a good memory. He doesn't race bikes anymore, so yeah, screw him. But, it was a good memory to bring up. And the other thing that caught me on that was I was like, hey, congrats. We were talking about the race, everything else. He goes back to his car to change, and he had a BlackBerry at the time. I remember this. And he goes and he picks up his BlackBerry, and he's like, oh, I got a phone message. Here, let me call him back. And it was from Brad Huff. Brad called him and was like, hey, man, I heard you had your first race today. How'd it go? I want to hear all about it. And I remember thinking to myself, this has got to be the only Cat 5 ever in the history of this sport that's had like a reigning national champion call him after his first Cat 5 race to see how he did. So,
well, that's a testament for who Brad is. Brad's still like that. Yeah. Still very much like that.
Definitely left an impression.
Yeah, my dad was proud of all three of his boys, for winning. We all won bike races. We all raced bikes and won bike races. And, we're all built a little bit differently, and Joel is a body full of muscle. So you get in his way and he's going to mow you down.
Yeah. And I don't think, I've never seen you do this, but I don't think you stop anytime you pass something shiny to check yourself out in, like a mirror.
No.
That's
Hell
Joel.
no.
That's Joel.
Joel was looking at himself in the mirror. I had teammates that would do that, but
if there was something even remotely reflective within the vicinity, he will stop at some point while you're talking to him, go and look at it and kind of check himself out and just kind of rearrange things.
Dude, I don't know, man. That doesn't
all
seem
the
like
time.
Joel.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah, it's funny. When he first moved to Chicago, he was super lonely. He didn't have any friends. He didn't have a girlfriend. He was very, very much like on his own living in this apartment. Yeah, and I said, dude, go join a cycling club. Go get into riding. He wasn't riding at the time, and I was like, just go ride, dude. Go do something that develops some form of community. And that's where he met his wife, met you, met Tim. That's a whole nother story. But cycling.
I think we've covered maybe part of it at some point, but he was a salesman to me in my old job, and he walked in and was sitting down doing the salesman thing, like, looking around, and I had all these cycling posters up and everything all over the place, and I had my bike behind me, I think, because I had ridden into the shop that day, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, you like bike racing?" And it was like, yeah, here we go, typical salesman. Oh, you watched the Tour de France? Do you think Lance is really doping? Do you how tiny is your saddle? All that kind of crap. I was waiting for all those questions. I was like, yeah, you could say. And he goes, do you like watching racing? I was like, yeah, you could say I do racing as well too. Oh, okay, that's cool. Do you like the like European stuff, like the road stuff? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, do you ever watch the European racing? I was like, he goes, you a fan of the European racing? And I was like, you could say I'm avid. And he looked at me, he goes, you ever heard of Garmin Chipotle? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, my brother races for them. And I was just like, I'm sorry. Let's reset the conversation here. And I remember I was looking at his business card again going, what the hell is this kid's name? Friedman. Oh, yeah, hold on. And I remember pulling you up and everything else. I was like, oh, crap. Yeah, no, that's right. We ended up becoming friends. I ended up getting him on a bike, and the rest is history. So,
yeah,
14, 15, 16 years of history on that one. So,
I enjoy that story quite a bit. I had never actually heard that, I don't think, from you directly like that. And I've always heard it indirectly. But the world of cycling is small, and it definitely opens up a lot of doors if you get into it. And it can anyways.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Or slam a lot of them shut, like on your happiness and livelihood. But anyway.
Depending on which way you go with it, yeah.
There's Rob.
There's Debbie Donor.
Way to keep it positive, buddy.
All right. Well, thank you for listening again, and thank you, and tune in to us next week. Enjoy the ride.
Goodbye.